It is the year 2472, and the Earth has suffered a great calamity. Hundreds of years of popular culture have vanished. Without the sacred films and texts for guidance, civilization is devoid of anything cool. Then, 3 incubation chambers are unearthed, and from within, men from the time of the great blockbusters emerge. Now, through highly interesting conversations, they share invaluable insight about what once was. The movies, the shows, the comics, toys, and books. This is the Hyperspace
Podcasting in the 25th century.
Welcome in, podcast pioneers, to the Hyperspace Podcasting in the 25th century, the interwebs' first and still only podcast. My name is Matt.
I'm Jared.
And I'm Mike.
The interwebs.
What are the interwebs?
The webs of the inner.
That's very well said.
Interwebs. Digital spiders making things.
Oh man, it's really bad.
I'm not gonna lie. When the World Wide Web was first kind of like out there, I had no idea what it was. I had no clue. I heard about it. I tried to pretend I was cool with it, but I had no idea.
You know, do you guys remember those AT&T commercials? They were in the early 90s, and they were narrated by Tom Selleck. And they were all vaguely like sci-fi, and they looked like they were set in the near future. And the tagline of each commercial was, "You will." Like, have you ever read...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that rings a bell.
And they're on YouTube, and they're quite interesting looking. And some of them are quite prophetic. But when they aired in the 1990s, it was like science fiction.
Have you ever watched a movie you wanted to, the minute you wanted to? Learn special things.
That's all taken from jazz.
Know any questions? From faraway places.
Oakland?
So where did jazz come from?
Good question. Or tucked your baby in. From a phone booth. You will. And the company that'll bring it to you, AT&T.
Tom Selleck narration for AT&T. You will. Have you ever read your kid a book from a different state?
That's right. God,
was
that in the 90s? Boy.
That was like early 90s.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I remember that stuff.
And the company who will bring it to you is AT&T.
I mean, that's the early internet. The early internet, man. What a crazy thing.
It was, it was, for me, it was this amorphous, like, whoa, what is this? It was like this magical, undefined thing that you had seen, like, in some movies, they had toyed around with it. What I knew of a modem was basically... you take a handset of a phone and plug it into this
I saw Ferris
device.
Bueller's Day Off, and I was fascinated by it. You know, we should talk today about the early internet. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea.
On your mark, get set. We're riding on the internet. Cyberspace, set free. Hello, virtual reality.
Interactive appetite, searching for a website, a window to the world, got to get online.
Take a spin, now you're in with the techno set. You're going surfing on the internet.
So why don't you tell us, Matt? You came up with this topic.
Mm-hmm.
What was your first exposure to what is now known as the internet?
Well, I mean, let's go way back. I mean, I briefly touched on it a few podcasts ago. We all had Commodore computers, and I think we were all on it. If not, I think Mike was. But I was on, they had this service called Quantum Link, which was kind of short. They called it Q-Link. And it was a real primitive internet that if you had a Commodore, you could be connected to other Commodore users in their common space. And it had stuff like email, primitive email. It had little rooms you could go into, chat rooms. I think primitive shopping. They had like a gaming casino. And they had the first, like... MMOG?
Yeah.
What are they?
The massive multiplayer.
Yeah, exactly. It's called like Club Caribe, where everyone could like interact and you could like solve mysteries together. And in fact, this Club Carib became the inspiration for George Lucas's Maniac Mansion game. I think one of the few games that Lucas was a part of was taken from that. But yeah, Quantum Link was one of those things. It came out in 1985, November 5th, 1985.
Oh, really?
That's right.
Wow.
Back to the Future connection somehow. And it was all for Commodore. And then later, this Quantum Link became America Online, AOL, which was made available on all computer platforms. Mm-hmm. So it was the precursor to AOL. So that's kind of what I was using in the late 80s. But the only caveat to using it was, aside from having a modem, and it cost, I think it was like $10 a month to use, which is kind of expensive back then. But it was also 6 cents a minute that you used it. I think it jumped it to 9 cents a minute by the end. So like,
you're on there 10 minutes. That's $1.
And $1 back in like 1987, 88 was, like $4 today. So you can imagine how expensive, being, you're on Quantum Link, on Q-Link, and you get engrossed in whatever you're doing, and like a few hours go by, and then your father comes to you the next week with the bill, and he says, "What the hell is this?"
Man.
And I mean, you're like, sorry?
The recording of one of our podcasts on Q-Link would have cost us $150.
Oh man. But that was my very first exposure to the internet. And it was pretty cool. And it was something to be said about being able to interact with other people. Even as a kid, you're just in a room and you see someone's avatar walk by and that's somebody. You're like, well, that's really somebody controlling that. And it was pretty cool. So that was like the first internet experience kind of I had.
Wow. And that was the late 80s, right?
It was like, I think it was like 87 maybe. But like, I know people listening to this, like if you're younger, that idea probably is incomprehensible that was the only piece of internet that existed that you had access to in like 1987 was this little tiny thing you could log on to if you owned a Commodore, and that was it. But that was amazing. It was like state of the art. Wow.
That is crazy. Mike, what about your first memories of what was the first like ISP that you encountered?
Well, I mean, the first time I got on was with the Commodore when, got on with the primitive.
Oh, you got the Quantum Leak as well?
Text. No, not. Well, it was just. It was just internet. I mean, was that different?
Yeah, because there was no web. There was no World Wide Web in like the late 80s.
Right. The only thing I had was just like that whole text thing where you just got online and you typed in, like you'd go to, I guess some guy had a server and it was Trade Wars and you would just type, go to this quadrant, and then your ship would warp to that quadrant and then you would do something.
You know what? I think that was part of Quantum Link, that they had something like that.
If that's what it was called, I don't know. I just had a modem that someone gave me.
I gotta tell you, my idea of what the internet was literally like watching Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where he had this thing on his desk where he put his phone in it, and it connected him automatically to the school computer that he could change everybody's grades. That's what I thought the internet
and he was mirroring his principles like computer.
Yeah, I really thought that's what you could do with the internet, and I was like, my ideas were blown apart. And I realized how little you could really do with it once you got on it.
Yeah, it's the first time I came across anything like that was Prodigy in 1990. My dad bought a PC that was made by Epson. Epson, of course, now known for their printers more than anything, but they made PCs in those days. And I think it was running the very first version of Windows. This would have been 1990. So
Windows 3.1.
It was 3.1. Yep. Mm-hmm. I want to show you something. So he actually sort of walked me through. Like, he's like, hey, look, you can get on here and you can look at Prodigy was a very basic, like, graphical interface. Like, it was mostly news. And I think there were, like, some, like, classified ads on there as well. And also, like, message boards, like bulletin boards. So I remember getting on there and thinking, wow, okay, so let me look up sci-fi movies. And there was this whole area dedicated to science fiction films. And you just, it's very basic, like a message board. You just read what people have written and the various replies. But for me, that blew my mind wide open. Because I was like, then, I had my 5 or 6 close friends that I would talk to about, Star Trek or Star Wars. And, there wasn't a whole lot of variety to bounce your ideas or opinions or, you'd have the same discussion over and over again. But for this, it was like, hey, if I type in something here, people from everywhere can look at it and respond to it.
Yeah.
And back then, I think I did type a lot about the Next Generation, because the Next Generation was like in its heyday in 1990. And we talked a lot about Star Trek. And Prodigy is where I first really started to get information about the Star Wars Holiday Special. Because there was no, I had a Starlog magazine that told me about it, and that was about it. So I wanted to get, like, all the info I could on that thing. Oh, and I talked to people on Prodigy who had seen it, and none of them had good things to say.
That's funny. Hey, so that PC, the Epson PC, did it have a plug-in modem? Like, the Commodore had a slot in the back for, like, this kind of, like, it was like a module. The modem was like an external module that you plugged in, and then you plugged the phone line into that.
It's like a brown box.
Yeah, it was just like a I don't know, like a shoe that looked like it fit into the back of your thing. And then later on in like the 90s, I had a PC computer. It was a crappy PC computer, but they went from having those modulistic modems into like a PCI insert card modem. No. Like a US Robotics like insert like PCI modem where it actually was like fit into the board.
No, I remember the modem in 1990 was external.
Yeah,
it was like a plug and play type of thing.
Man, that's another thing. It's like, think about like computers today. Like the desktop I'm using to record this right now has Wi-Fi capability, and it's also hardwired into the internet. The modem's inside, obviously, and it's seamless. You turn it on, you have access to the internet. But like back then, and I know, of course, if you're younger and you're listening to this podcast, you're like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but you really don't. It's like the process to get on the internet was a step-by-step thing. You logged on, it gave you the loading screen, and then the modem kicked in, and you heard that kind of signature sound. It's that sound will forever be the internet sound for me.
That's what the internet sounds like.
It's what the internet sounded like. And sometimes it wouldn't connect. Remember those days where it's like it would just get hung up?
Yes.
It wouldn't finish that like tone. It wouldn't go like
Well, I remember more being on AOL. If there was too many people on, you couldn't get on.
Yeah, the bandwidth got real limited on AOL, and then exactly right. It wouldn't lock you on. You used to get so frustrated.
Or if somebody in your house picked up the line.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
And you would be disconnected.
Oh, well, talk about that. Like, what was what happened there?
Well, it was somebody in your house. I grew up in a house with one phone line, and if somebody, and I grew up with 3 other people in the house, and if you're online in the middle of the afternoon, my mom was the main offender. She would, I would all of a sudden, my session would close out, and then I'd hear from another part of the house, "Sorry, were you online?"
Well, if AOL was different, it would just say, you'd be in the middle of something, and you'd hear, "Goodbye."
Goodbye.
Yes.
Yeah.
Goodbye. That's what was like really crazy about it, is that, it's that somebody could just like that without even meaning to, disconnect the whole session.
That was
Very frustrating.
The telephone line, I mean, it was limited what it could give you. I mean, I remember like when like somebody would send you a picture, it would take like forever. It would slowly like go piece by line down your screen, and it would just reveal itself, and finally you have like the Enterprise on your screen or something like that, or a Star Destroyer that your friend opted to send you for 13 hours. It's like a 2 kilobyte picture that took like 40 minutes to expose itself on the screen. Just so funny.
That was...
Well, before I got on AOL, when I was using the Commodore, then I only used it a handful of times, and then I just didn't do anything else with it. And then a few years later, I went to my friend's work, and he was doing something. He goes, "Here, just play around on the computer." This was probably like 92, 93, something, probably about the same time Jared's talking about. So I get on the work computer, and that is when the internet was the internet. Like Yahoo, he put me towards Yahoo because that used to be the big search engine that everyone used.
Huge.
And I remember I just typed in Megadeth, and something that was back then that you don't see anymore were the fan pages. Fan pages don't really exist anymore because whoever creates their own web page, and there's licensing stuff, and this was before all that. And there were these different Megadeth pages, and they had artwork from the albums. They had information about the albums, and I remember I just was like lost. I was just like, oh my gosh, and I was just like reading all this information, and it had lyrics to songs, the songs that you'd never you didn't have, like the B-sides that you didn't have the lyrics to on the CD, and it was stuff like that. And I was like, it was just like that was like the first time I was like, oh my gosh, this is really something huge. And then, of course, I shortly thereafter got my own computer. I bought it off a friend of mine named Chris. He sold me his old computer, and I remember logging in. Same thing, and it was right when whatever year Escape from L.A. came out. That was the year I got that computer, because I went to the Paramount official page for Escape from L.A., and they had this documentary online, and it was like tiny little video, and I kept trying to download it, and it just took too long. It just never finished. And
96.
Okay, so that was when I got my PC that I was logging in on the internet from home. And I could never download that tiny little video.
That's funny. I forgot about Yahoo, how popular it was. Like, Yahoo was like the big boy in the block. Like,
well, what about Alta Vista?
Yeah, but you had Alta Vista.
Bigfoot.
You had a few other ones out there.
I don't even remember those.
But Yahoo was like the mega one. Yahoo was
they
like,
had those commercials. Yahoo
was like Google. Yahoo was like the place where you searched for everything. And I forgot about that. But I remember. Actually, I was at Florida State University, and they offered their students free internet access. So, which was amazing. I thought that was the best thing in the world. So, here you are in your apartment. Hook up your computer, and you log on via the university's credentials, and you're on the internet. There you go. It's in your place. It was unbelievable.
And this was at a time when people were still getting free hours for AOL, where they give away the CDs.
AOL, no, not the CDs. AOL got me through college by me always calling AOL and saying I'm interested, and they would send me free discs.
Yeah, you could reuse the discs.
So I had 100 AOL discs that I used for everything, because remember, it was a 3. For those
10 free hours.
If you aren't familiar with how things used to be. You used to use 3.5-inch discs or 5 1/4 discs.
Yes.
In the floppy drive, and it's stored. I forget how much it's stored, but
2
that's
megabytes.
Yeah, that's you put your reports or your pictures or whatever you put on a disc, and that's what you did. And so you brought your disc into school, you put it in their computer, you saved stuff, got viruses all over it, and brought it back home, and but that's what you did. But AOL got me through college with all the discs. I had stacks of these things.
Yeah, and going back to the pay-as-you-go model, that's what a lot. That was like the the plan for like Prodigy. We had Prodigy first, then we had CompuServe, and then we had AOL. And all of those things were kind of pay as you go. You know, you've got so many hours you're allotted, and that's what you've paid for. And after that, you know, you're going to get dinged.
You know, that's the model of everything, though, isn't it? Long distance used to be, you know, pay per minute. Early internet access was pay per minute. Anything that I think, or cell phone use was pay per minute.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think anything that you find that you're paying per minute, you can probably be, you know, sure that in the short time forward from now, it's going to be, you know, a flat rate for whatever the service is. But
yeah.
But that's how the internet was, man. I mean, but that's funny. I forgot about the AOL discs. Boy, that was like a treasure trove to get those things home.
You can buy them on eBay for like $12.
$12, man.
I was getting them for free, man.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
I used to work at Kroger, a grocery store chain, and we would have free ones in a little pamphlet box at our cash registers. And people,
really?
You could just take one if you wanted it.
I mean, like AOL discs to log. Man, that was a brilliant marketing scheme, wasn't it?
AOL in the mid '90s, they pretty much ruled the roost on the internet access.
But then I guess it got to where you didn't need AOL anymore.
People figured that out. They're like, because AOL is basically a gateway to the internet, and it's, you know, this is the turnstile you walk through to get to the internet. But, you know, people were figuring out, hey, I don't need to go through this turnstile. I mean, it's wide open down here. I'm just going to walk down here and go in.
Well, that's what Yahoo turned out to be. Yahoo was a browser. I mean, AOL offered browsing capabilities, and they offered some proprietary chat kind of stuff, and you know they had their own email and their own messaging system. The messaging was actually pretty revolutionary at the time. You know, everyone kind of copied that, the messaging. You know, I can't believe I still have friends that have AOL access. Like
my
emails.
first email, my first email was an AOL.
Yeah, I don't remember what mine was. I think mine was a Hotmail.
Aside
from the FSU email that I had, my first my own was like the Hotmail.
Yeah, I had college emails first, and it was in college where I first really started to, you know, I got my first email from college, you know, because this was like 96, 97, and professors would start emailing you stuff, and you had to log in and check. So that was really my first exposure to email like that. But the thing that I remember, and this is a crazy story, and I can't believe I haven't told this. Back in the Prodigy days, it wasn't email. It was just, you know, you typed messages, and then you would have a little indicator when somebody had responded to you. Well, on Prodigy, the film critic Roger Ebert, he had his own section on Prodigy, and he was very active in that. I mean, if you typed him a message, he would usually respond to you.
Pre-Twitter, huh?
Yeah. So one day, I had 3 correspondences with him about Back to the Future Part 3, Young Guns 2, and Rocky 5. And so, you know, I just emailed him. I printed them out because I thought it was really cool that Roger Ebert we were like conversing about movies. And the one thing I remember was we were talking about Rocky 5, and it had just come out, and he didn't really like it very much. But then he told me, and then he sent me basically the version. I don't know if he typed this. He must have. He typed me like the last page of the version where Rocky dies. And he goes, they were originally going to kill him, and this is what it was going to be. And
he typed all that for you back then?
He typed it out. I mean, he was very generous with his time. I mean, he's emailing this 15-year-old kid who's asking about
And he sent you his
movies.
address and
No, and pictures of his no jaw having self.
I think this is no jaw.
Yeah, this was well before that. But
Wow.
no,
Pretty amazing, though. Pretty
but
amazing.
it was crazy, and I remember printing them out, and of course they're long gone, but that's one of my early memories of Prodigy was like, wow, I have access to like a celebrity who would actually talk back to me, and it was really crazy.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it was, to me in college, the internet was great for finding like sound files of my favorite movies that you could put on your computer.
Oh yeah, that was another thing. The websites.
Sound America. Remember?
Well, I would go to like I
billion
went
of
to a Big Trouble in Little China page, and they had all these WAV files of
Isn't it great?
Jack Burton.
was
That's something
great.
you don't see anymore.
No, they disappeared. But like, it was a big deal, like on your like Windows machine, your PC, like every little like sound attribute you could make something. So
Yes.
of
There
course,
was
your
this
whole,
great Dawn of the Dead fan page that had like pictures of a board game that had been released, and I mean it was just really cool.
that's what the internet was in its early days. It was kind of a free for all. It had its shadiness, of course, but
It was. I
the
mean,
access to like a young 20-year-old to go out there and find like stuff about their favorite films and favorite TV shows that it's just like all of a sudden you had the world was at your fingertips, and that's kind of, you take that for granted now when you think about it, because even my kids, they use YouTube, they see stuff like from all over the place. I mean, to have access outside of an Encyclopedia Britannica in your house, which is all I had growing up, was an encyclopedia, and it was great. The encyclopedia worked for me, but to be able to have that all of a sudden at your fingertips, you could type in anything and get information on it. It's unbelievable. You can't even fathom. Like, you can't fathom that coming into your life. It's just like it's a different. The doors finally are open.
I remember, speaking of getting stuff that you couldn't find. Like, it was on CompuServe, where I was corresponding with the guy who had a copy of the holiday special on
really?
VHS, and we worked out an arrangement. I would trade him a copy of the episode of Young Indiana Jones that Harrison Ford appeared in.
Mm-hmm.
So I made a copy, he made a copy, and it was all trust. It was like, okay, I'm going to put my tape in the mail today, and we exchanged addresses, and a week later I had a copy of the holiday special, and he had his Indiana Jones tape.
Isn't that funny?
And I finally watched it, and it was terrible.
So that was the first time you ever saw the holiday special.
It was the mid 90s.
Well, what a rabbit hole that is, going down, right from Prodigy, where you're talking about it, to finally going into another ISP with CompuServe,
to finally finding a guy who had a copy. It's like, look, what do you want for this? It was really a lot of trading back then. Mm-hmm. There was no real exchange of money.
Right.
But he's like, well, do you have a copy of this Indiana Jones episode? And I was like, absolutely I do. Do you want it? He goes, okay, let's do it.
I mean, I guess if you went back 10 years before that, right, and like you wanted to get a copy of the holiday special, unless you're going to like a comic book convention, or you're going to, or somebody locally, how are you going to get it?
I don't even there. And now, like you just said, it's all right here.
It's amazing.
I can watch the holiday special on YouTube right now.
It's iPhones and smartphones are next level stuff. But I mean, like what we are on this podcast right now are the monkeys touching the monolith in 2001 in the beginning, and the monolith was the early internet, and
I think you just found
it changed
your
our
thumbnail.
lives. It changed our lives. It really did. It changed our lives, and it changed. It was the first time the light had been shown down the end of the tunnel, and it was like you couldn't believe it. And to what the internet is now, it's like it's such a commonplace. It's such a piece of like everyday culture. It's like, I mean, we take it for granted in first world countries. I'm sure if we go to underdeveloped countries, the internet is still a marvel. But we take it for granted in this place.
I think it is super cool that I am doing this podcast, and I'm looking at Matt in New York. I am in Florida, and I'm watching Mike look at his phone, and he's in Tennessee.
Yeah.
So that, 20 years ago, that would have seemed like magic.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, it's crazy stuff.
And
it's
a lot of
amazing.
people do that and end up getting in big trouble.
Oh, you mean? Are you talking
Doing stuff they shouldn't be doing
on the internet?
People. Yeah.
Okay.
And hey, look, the internet's a double-edged sword too, right? It's like
Sure.
Just ask the bass player for Megadeth.
I mean, look, I remember when I first started my job at this home shopping place I used to work back in the day, and I remember I was at my cubicle, and the news came up on my computer in the morning, and I remember thinking, wow, this is really cool, because I'm reading a story about a guy in the middle of Africa in a village who was caught by the villagers stealing a chicken. And as punishment, they made this poor guy eat the whole chicken, beak, feathers, and all. And as a result, he died. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, that's tragic. But I'm thinking, wait a minute. I'm sitting in the middle of like Florida reading about some poor bastard who stole a chicken in the middle of Africa and had to eat it. I'm like, that's what the internet has given me. I'm like, maybe, that's how much access to the world is out there. It's like, it's crazy.
How did that story even get out?
I don't know, but it got out, and I read about it. And I've always remembered it, thinking, like, I can't believe here I am sitting in this cubicle reading about this poor guy eating a chicken in the middle of Africa.
Man, that set a precedent, that's for sure.
But, I mean, but that's how whether it's a double-edged sword or not, I mean, it's like, is too much information available a good thing, a bad thing? I think it's good, but,
Here's where I think it's a bad thing. And I'm going to be serious for a moment. I think the problem now is everything feels like it's kind of cool that the world is like more interconnected, but at the same time, it feels like everything feels like smaller. Like you have something happen in Detroit, or you have something happen 100 miles away, and it's like suddenly it's like, you see it and it's like, well, look what everyone's doing now.
Yeah.
Because you see one thing, and you forget that the world's a big place.
Yeah.
And these isolated events are what they are, isolated events. And it doesn't mean like everyone on the planet is doing it. I think we have a hard time separating that.
No, you said it right. You said it right. You feel that you are more connected to the bigger world than you really are. And a lot of people, and that goes across to like, even like, cable news and all this stuff.
The 24-hour news cycle is...
Yeah. But I mean, to have this much access to information and opinions and news and op-eds, and you couple that with the news now, everybody feels that their opinion is super important, and everybody feels that they are connected and owed something by a greater community that they really don't belong to. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the small communities that people live in, they don't involve themselves as much. And they worry about things that don't affect them, because they have access to it. And it's like, it's a crazy thing. And it's a weird balance on how people really adjust that. And you know what it is? It's only really a generation into this. It's not even a mature kind of like thing. Yeah. So people are still like, you got people who are like, our parents use the internet and watch the news, and their world they're trying to figure it out. We adopted it late, in our later, teens, early 20s, but kids are born into it like our kids almost.
Yeah.
I can't even fathom how they're gonna balance it out when they're our age.
Yeah. I think our kids are going to end up as batteries in the Matrix with cables jacked into the back of their heads.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to the internet, people actually think that that's the world we live in.
Well, that's true. There you go.
I think we live in the Matrix. Okay, yeah, probably.
Well, there's some people who think we live on the moon underneath a dome. But that's also something fueled by the internet. But it's neither here nor there.
That's true. And you know what? I'm glad the internet is what it is now.
You know what? I want our kids, all of our kids, I want them to sit down at an old 386 Pentium machine, and I want them to log on to AOL and see if they can even function.
Goodbye.
Well, here's
No chance.
here's something for you, and I used to live with a guy named Deke, and the game Enter the Matrix came out about the same time as the sequels came out.
Deke is a listener and
yeah,
a friend of the show.
Yeah, this is not an insult. This is not me taking a poke at him at all. I mean, it's kind of funny. So the game had this extra feature where you get into bonus content, but you had to go into it like an old school computer.
Okay.
Where you had to type in, run.
Oh, you had to
system,
sure. Like code, almost.
Yeah, and there's not that. How many years do you think is the difference between? He's about
Deke?
5 or 6.
Deke's our age. Deke's the same age as.
No, he's a little younger.
No, he's not. He's the same age as
he's
Jared
like
and I.
45, 46.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a
age.
little younger than me.
But
Yeah.
you're 80. So
he's the same age as Jared and I. By the way, Deke has an amazing brand new podcast called Sidetracked. I highly recommend that you check that out and put that on your podcast listen list because it is fantastic.
But anyway, he was like, "What is this?" I was like, "Oh yeah, you have to put in like computer programming," and he's like, "I don't know what that is," and I was like, "Oh my gosh," it made me feel old because I was like, "Wow, yeah,
Well,
I guess
look,
those before GUIs."
I will tell you that I was lucky that when I was in college, one of my good friends and I were really into computers, and we each had PCs, and we each learned, all the Windows shortcuts, all like the basic DOS commands, commands. Who knows what DOS commands are these days? Who knows? But we knew it all. We could function through a computer and get through a computer pretty well. But that's what you did. It was almost like a car back then. Your computer, because you were taking it apart all the time. You were like,
yes,
pulling components out, putting new ones in. You were going into the registry and trying to clean it up all the time because it was always a mess. So you kind of learned like these commands that made you like a functional computer mechanic, basically, to get you through Windows, because Windows was kind of buggy too, and that's just what you did. You were always pulling your computer apart. You were always going into the system to defrag it and to get the registry cleaned up.
And Windows XP was the best versions of Windows ever.
Windows 95 and XP were both really solid, really good. Windows
Like
95 was great. Windows XP
If anything went wrong, I could get in and figure it out. These new Windows, they've made them tamper-proof. It's like you really, like, what?
Yeah, it's true. But man, I'm very thankful that I grew up as a kid without it.
Yeah.
And I'm very thankful that I'm an adult that got to experience the transition into it. But boy, it's a brave new world for kids. Brave new world.
Yeah, and it is tough to unplug them. I mean, Mike, I see, you guys do good jobs getting your family unplugged and out doing other things. I'm still working on that formula myself, but yeah, you do have to take a very active role in making sure your kid is just not a tech zombie, because all of them would fall into that if left unchecked. I'm convinced.
The rabbit hole that just never ends.
Yeah.
But, I have to tell you, though, the internet has given the world a lot of great stuff, and we gave the internet a podcast.
Yes, we did.
So
the first
and
only one.
That we're the first one. And if you haven't listened to us before, welcome on board. You're a podcast pioneer, and we'd like you to tell a friend, have them subscribe to us, have them visit us at thehyperspace.net. Got some great merchandise there for you. And go to our YouTube channel. We got all kinds of fun videos. We have 2 YouTube channels. Find the one that gives the videos. We got some good videos for you.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, subscribe, and share the podcast.
Do it.
You know you can't live without this content, so subscribe to The Hyperspace, podcasting in the 25th century. Follow us on social media, leave us a review, and join us here next time as we take you into the 25th century.